Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm excited to have Vanessa McCausland joining me. Hi Vanessa.
Hi
Oops,
Jackie, hi everyone.
Vanessa, we've had a few times before, so good to have you back again and talking about your probably not so new book, Dreaming in French.
Yep, that's the one.
So, a little bit about Vanessa. Vanessa studied English and Australian literature at the University of Sydney and dreamed of one day writing fiction. She then went on to immerse herself completely in writing about real people, working as a journalist for 20 years. Vanessa has been a news, medical, entertainment, and arts reporter for the Daily Telegraph, and her writing has appeared in numerous other publications. She's happy now to finally be creating fictional characters, and she lives in Sydney with her husband and daughter. So, once again, thanks for joining us, Vanessa. Do you want to start off by telling us a bit about Dreaming in French?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Jackie. It's lovely to come on and convene with people from all over the world. It's very exciting. So, Dreaming in French came out sort of mid last year. So I'm a little bit rusty on the elevator pitch. I haven't done it in months, but I'll give it a go. Um, So it's set in France. It's a contemporary fiction with sort of a mystery element, I guess you'd say. Um, so my protagonist, Saskia Weil, is living in Sydney with her family when she receives a letter from a French solicitor informing her that she's inherited half of a villa on a tiny island off the southwest coast of France called Ile de Ré. And Saskia is rather surprised by this, but she returns to this island with her family, and it's where she actually spent a summer when she was 19 as an au pair. And it was here that she met Simone Durant, a French heiress, and Felix Allard, a salt worker. And Simone has left half of this crumbling villa on the island to Felix and half to Saskia. And Felix is now a sort of reclusive actor living on the island. And Simone has also left Saskia a manuscript written in French. And Saskia needs to sort of decipher what Simone is telling her and why she's left her this villa and why she's drawn her back to this island that she sort of has repressed really from her memory. And it's set in the present, sort of Saskia with her family on the island, and it's set in the past in Simone's voice during this summer that Felix, Saskia, and Simone spent together. And Saskia needs to sort of figure out what actually happened in the past and sort of reckon with that in order to save what is most precious to her in the present.
And I was going to say as well, so this is your fourth book, I think, is that right?
It is,
And I
yeah,
was just
yeah.
having a look. I think I've read all of your books now and
Oh,
really
thank
love
you.
them all. I always find them really great and very emotional, which is really good.
Thank
Um,
you.
could you tell us what idea did you first have for Dreaming in French?
Yeah, so I wrote this sort of during the tail end of the pandemic, and I think I was sort of really craving experiences. And I hadn't traveled for a long time.
Mm,
I hadn't been back to France for maybe 14, 15 years. And I guess I was actually really sort of missing that experience of going to another country and when it just you're so inspired, the language sort of envelops you. And I wanted to transport myself into that in a book.
mm,
And
mm,
that's the magic of fiction, of course, because as writers, when we're writing the book, we're sort of there as well. We're able to escape our reality. So I think it was a bit of an escapist
mm.
exercise for me. And I've always loved France and the French language. I studied it at school and then I went on to study it at uni. And I myself was a nanny on Ile de Ré,
Oh,
just
you were.
like
Oh,
like
yeah.
Saskia.
Yeah.
Not quite as dramatic as what happens in the book. Unfortunately,
Any French boyfriends?
Yes, no, unfortunately, no famous French actors in the picture. But yeah, I guess I took that as a leaping off point because I knew with the way I write, I love to start with a sense of place. So with all my books, the sense of place is sort of the bedrock of the story, and it really helps me to bring the characters alive. I don't know why, but setting is really important to me. And I thought I lived on this island for 6 months. I might have only been 19, but when you're so young, and it was my first time in Europe, it sort of seeped into me in a long-term memory kind of way. And I was very doubtful at first as to whether I could write it. But then when I started to, try and evoke the setting, I just found that the smell of the salt and the pine forests and the heat and the landscape sort of came alive to me when I was writing it. And I thought, yeah, I can do this. I'm going to go for it, even though it was quite challenging because I hadn't been there for so long. And half of this book is written in Simone's voice. Simone is French. So I enrolled in Alliance Française, the Sydney French course, and I did a complete sort of re-immersion in the language because I thought I can't, pretend to be a French heiress when I have forgotten the language. So for probably a year, I just really immersed myself in this place. And it was amazing what you can find online now because everything is there. I could see, I could watch videos of people cycling around the island, which is what I did at 19. I could, just that everything was there. I could see the salt marshes because they play a really important role. And I could research all about the salt marshes, which I hadn't done at 19 because I wasn't interested in history back then. But I could go back and sort of revisit the island from a more mature sort of perspective, I guess. And I really understood the historical context of it and was inspired by that. So yeah, that's kind of how it came about. But it had a bit of a rocky genesis because I lost my confidence in it. I think I was also really exhausted from the pandemic, and I didn't, probably about a third of the way through, I just didn't think that I was going to be able to finish it.
Oh, really?
And I really just walked away from it, and I thought, I don't know what I'm trying to do here. Like with all my other books, I've actually gone on road trips and visited the places that I'm setting. And I'm thinking, I haven't been to this place in 25 years. But eventually I came back to it and it kept sort of bugging me until I took it up again. And honestly, this book has been such a lesson in not walking away from something, just giving it time and coming back to it. And then I was able to sort of puzzle it all together. So it's given me a lot of confidence going forward when I get to a place in a manuscript that I feel really lost and disheartened. I think, well, I did it for dreaming in French. I pulled it together and I got there in the end. So it was good in that sense, in learning all of that.
And is there anything you can share with us that you did do to help you pull it all together and get through and get to the end?
I think what I did was, I think having time away is sometimes what you need. I think I took maybe even 3 months or so where I let it go, and I just thought, no, I think it's done. And I think by taking that pressure off myself, I was able to just it's ironic because it's called dreaming, and I think it probably invaded my dreams and my subconscious, and that wouldn't let me let the story go. So there was obviously enough there that I knew that I could somehow piece it together. But it was the relationship between Saskia and Felix that was problematic for me. I got to a point in the book and I was like, what is their relationship? I'm building up to this thing and I don't know what it is. And so I think I knew what the problem was. And so instead of fixating on how that scene was stuck, I just left that. And I that's the beauty of writing different timelines, because you can actually just leave one when it becomes problematic and just push ahead in the other timeline. And sometimes that other timeline will give you the answer and you can go back to the stuck bit. So I think that's probably what happened with this.
Yeah. And great that you did push through and wrote this wonderful book for us.
Thank you.
Could you tell me now, like you said before, it's been like 6 months, I think, for the book to be out. Is there anything that you've heard from readers about your book that you'd like to share with us? Maybe something that surprised or really touched you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, the things that readers write is so wonderful, and it's the thing that keeps me writing. People have got such an opportunity now with Instagram. You can just write to an author, and like I answer anything that anyone ever writes to me, and it's so lovely to hear their feedback. And I've had there've been people who have said that they've actually booked a holiday on the island after reading it, and that they're actually going to go there and visit it, which I thought was the ultimate compliment. And that maybe I should be charging for French tourism. And there have been other people who actually holidayed at the island and then read the book afterwards. And just said how much they loved that I was able to capture, the feeling of the island. So that was also a compliment. And there's a sort of a serious and sort of, important thread in this to do with domestic abuse. And so that's something that runs through the book. And I've had some lovely messages from women who have just told me their own personal stories of relationships they've been in where they've been very trapped, and just that they felt with this book that that they felt sort of heard. And so when that sort of thing happens, I mean, basically in tears reading things like that, because when you sort of touch someone on that level of their own life experience, it's a real privilege. And just obviously writing, you want to entertain, but when you can do more than that and sort of actually mean something in someone's life, that's really why I do it.
To know that you've touched people in that as well must be amazing. And what have you had a chance to go back to the island?
I haven't, no.
Is that something you want to do?
Oh, I'd love to go back. I did go back to France though in October of last year on another research trip. And unfortunately I couldn't really go for more than, I went with my mum. We went for 2.5 weeks, just because I, got my daughter who's 13. It's hard to leave for a longer period of time than that, and it's sort of hard to make a family holiday from a research trip because you really have to get everything done. But I would love to go back one day. And just going to France again and just being submerged in the culture and the language. I understood in a way why I wrote the book, because I felt so inspired again and just fell in love with the place all over again.
And yeah, and like that's something that I really felt it really took you away. And like you said, locations are really important to you. And I really felt that with Dreaming in French, which was great. And I've found that with all of your other books, the locations are really important to all of the books
Yeah,
you've written.
yeah,
Mm,
absolutely.
mm. And we've got a few people watching, so just wanted to say to those watching, if you do have any questions for Vanessa, please type them in comments and I can read them out. I've got a question from Belinda. She said she loves your books and she wonders
Thank you.
what you're working on next and when it will be available.
Thanks, Belinda. I am working on the book I'm writing at the moment is actually the book after the next book coming out, because it's such a long timeline in publishing. But the next book that I've got coming out late this year or early next year, I'm not sure exactly. That one is set back in Australia, and it's a little bit more of a psychological thriller, but it's still got a very strong sense of place, still the same, I think, voice as my other books. But it's got a little bit of a metaphysical sort of bent to it. So it's a slight deviation from my other books. But then the book I'm writing now is set back in France again. And that's going to have a slight historical feel to it. So I feel really lucky that I'm able to sort of, I think all my books have a similar voice. I write it in a similar tone and voice, and there's always a mystery and it's contemporary, but I get to sort of play a little bit in terms of just trying slightly different things, which is really exciting for me, just to have that newness. So
and I think most of do all of your books have dual timelines?
Yes,
Yeah.
and they've all got dual timelines.
Yeah,
at
so
least
your new
at
one,
least 2 timelines.
yeah, and your new ones will be like that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why I'm so drawn to the past present thing. I do really love books that do that, but I think it's just in some ways it's what you know as a writer, and I know how to do that. So and I find as well, as I was saying before about when you get stuck on one timeline, you can then go to the other timeline, and it's almost, I feel like it's cheating in some ways, because you get to sort of move things around a bit. I think it would be really hard to always be in the one person's head and always be on the one timeline. To me, that is a harder way of telling a story. But I guess it's just what you're used to, or
And Sharon wonders how you choose your characters' names.
Oh, that's a good question. I choose them quite early on, because I feel like the sound of their name and what they're called is part of how I feel out the character. So, for example, with The Beautiful Words, which was my third book, I had a character. I have a character called Sylvie, and I really loved the name Sylvie, but the edits came back from my publisher and my editor, and they said, we think the name should change to Sylvia, because in it there's references to Sylvia Plath. And so they were like, why don't we just make the name Sylvia instead of Sylvie? And I just thought, no, this is not Sylvia, this is Sylvie. There's a completely different sound to that name. Sylvia has a completely different connotation in character to me than Sylvie. Sylvie's sort of light, and Sylvia is heavier. And so I realized at that moment why naming is so important. And I said to my editor, no, I'm sorry, I can't change her name.
Yeah.
And I did, and they were great. They said, no, that's fine, you can keep it. But sometimes the names just literally come out of thin air. And it's like, where did that come from? Like in The Beautiful Words, there's Sylvie and her best friend Case, and Case is spelled Kase.
Okay.
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know what that means. I don't know where that name, and that was another thing. Well, what's Case? And I was like, I don't know, that's her name. She just, that fits the character that I'm feeling. And so with Dreaming in French, we've got Saskia, and Saskia just fits her character. And then Simone as the French girl, and Felix. Actually, I'll tell you the story very briefly of how Felix came about. It's quite strange. So I do this walk near my house by the foreshore near Manly, and every day I walk it, and I was trying to think of this story for weeks, days, trying to like get my brain into story mode, and I just saw on the pavement that someone had written the word Felix.
Oh, really?
And it was next to this old rambling house by the sea. And for some reason, just on that day, I was like, Felix, and the house, which I'd been looking at thinking, who lives there? It's so atmospheric and like a bit run down, but probably beautiful. And those two things sort of fused together in my imagination. And that's literally kind of all I had for quite a while, that there was going to be a rambling house, Felix, who was going to be an actor, and then I came across in my mind Saskia, and it was going to be set in Sydney for a while, but Felix was on the pavement. That's how he came.
Yeah. No, that's a very unusual way to get a character's name, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I can see you've got lots of books behind you. Are you able to tell us what you like reading, and maybe if there's something you've read lately you want to share with us that you recommend?
Yes. I read more voraciously now than I ever have. I think I've always been a reader, but now that I'm an author, I feel like reading is like half of the job. You just learn so much by reading other authors. So I love, my favourite would probably be commercial literary crossover, which I think is sort of what I write. So I love a really engaged story, but I love it to be, you know, written beautifully or with consideration. I really like psychological thrillers as well, that sort of fast-paced, and I really like literary fiction too. So I read quite eclectically, and at the moment I am reading Tom Lake by Anne Patchett, which I'm really loving.
I haven't read that yet, but I've heard lots of great things about it.
Yeah, it's beautiful, really beautiful. I'm reading that. I just finished, I wrote these down because I knew that you were going to ask, and I can never remember on the spot. Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. She's an American author, and it's a little bit of a riff on Little Women. But set in contemporary America. Loved that. I just read The Search Party by Hannah Rochelle. She's a really beautiful writer who's sort of gone a little bit more into crime thriller territory. But she writes with a beautiful sense of place. So that's set on the coast of Cornwall in the UK. And that's fantastic. I read that in like 2 days. And another one that I loved, that I read very fast, was Prima Facie by Susie Miller. She is an Australian author, and her book was a play. It's been performed all over the world, and she's now turned it into a novel. And it's basically a sort of insight into criminal law. And it's about this woman who is a lawyer who does sexual assault cases, and then she is sexually assaulted and has to, I guess, navigate the system from a different perspective. And that's not giving anything away, because that's the opening page says everything, like tells you all of this. So they are amazing books that I've just finished.
Yeah, no, they sound like some great ones. have to add them to my ever never-ending list of books to read. Sounds like some
I
good
know,
ones.
so many.
Yeah, there are. And well, thanks so much for talking with me. It's been great talking to you. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again maybe early next year when you have another book
Thank
out.
you. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
So lovely to come along and chat with you, Jackie.
And thanks for those who asked questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.